Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be trying out Trial of the Hordes and seeing if my original build still works in this. Let's go.
So this is the build that I've been using for Trial of the Hordes for quite some time now, and I basically haven't changed it up just because I never really play this game mode, or when I do I just rush through it for the event rewards, and I basically just don't really like this game mode, so I don't always play it very often. So for the build I'm using Magic Missile, Arcane Torrent, Lightning Nova, Meteor and Ice Armor as well. And with Ice Armor I'm using the Hailstone Essence for that 6-hit immunity. I'm not going to go into depth with the build because I found this hasn't really worked so well for me this time. And what we're going to do is test out a different build in a couple of different matches, and then I will talk through everything I'm using for that as well. So for now I'll let you watch this match and just see how it goes. So this was a little bit unfortunate. I was doing really well until I got jumped on there by the boss, and that was also because I was locked in place by the elites there, so I couldn't actually move out of the way. So I lost that, and I do feel like I can do better with a different build. So this is what we're going to try out now. We're going to head into another match with a new build and see exactly how this works. I'm going to test this out in several matches because this first one looks like it is against a bot. So this is probably going to be over in a few seconds, and then we'll test it out against hopefully some real players. So just as I expected, that match was over super fast and it was a victory. So we're going to head into another match now, and this will hopefully be against a real player. With this build, I swapped out a couple of my set items, which unfortunately broke up my 4-piece sets. This is what I mean about my crafting. I've had such bad luck with it. So I'm using 2 pieces of Vitus here, and then unfortunately I'm only using 3 pieces of Grace and 3 pieces of Angmets, just because I've not been able to craft decent items for Vitus to basically do a straight swap on Angmet items. So this will give me a little bit of a upper hand because Vitus will give me that beneficial effect duration. So it pretty much gives 100% uptime on Ice Armor because I have beneficial duration as well on my family bonus in my reforging. So Ice Armor should last pretty much 100% of the time in this match, and that will give me a little bit of an advantage if the other player doesn't have this skill or the beneficial effect duration in their build. Something I'd recommend in Trial of the Hordes is to leave as many of the globes on the floor as possible. So sometimes you can't avoid them. As we're close to the 1 minute mark, I'm starting to pick some of them up. But I do try not to pick any of them up until we're at like the minute mark. So once you have the bosses spawning and attacking, it makes it a little bit easier to defeat them if you've got any beneficial effects on you. So we have the alchemical shrine, or the alchemical globe, should I say, and these work really nicely against the mobs, and that's why I always leave them till last as well. So that match was a victory for us. We're going to try one more with this build and see how it goes, see if we get another win, and then I'll talk through the build in a little bit more detail. So I didn't actually have any time to run more matches after this one, but I did run all 3 of these matches with this build back to back before I left for work on Sunday, because I wanted to give it a fair test and see if it did win over and over again, or whether it was just like a fluke winning the first one. Now it may look like I've launched that Scorch Fire Flurry with no target, but because it gives that magma on the floor, it's kind of preempting where the mobs are going to land. And this ended up being another win for me with this build. So let's now take a look at everything we're using and talk through it in a bit more detail. Starting off, I've actually got 3 pieces of magnets equipped, but obviously only get the benefits of 2, and I wouldn't actually recommend using this for Trial of the Hordes. It's just that I didn't really have any other options with my set items. I would recommend 4 pieces of Grace, so I've got 2 equipped here, and that obviously boosts my continual and channeled damage. I'm also using 2 pieces of Vitus, so this increases the duration of all beneficial effects by 30%, and I would recommend going with 4 pieces of that and 4 pieces of Grace, or 4 pieces of Vitus and 4 pieces of Shalbas. Those would be my favourite choice options if I was to redo this build, and if I actually had all the set items that I needed. Also, with 4 pieces of Vitus, you get that increased attack speed by 30% for 3 seconds. So moving on to Helm, we've got Fire Flurry. Scorch now hurls a ball of magma that bursts when it strikes an enemy, creating a pool of magma that burns and stuns enemies. Scorch damage is increased by 18%, so that works really nicely in this build for the mobs. We also have on the chest Halted Breath, so this is more defensive. Ice Armor duration is increased by 30%, and Ice Armor cooldown is reduced by 3.6%, so that works really well with Vitus. We've got Crystalline Shadow on the shoulder. Disintegrate now summons an arcane deputy that follows you and channels a disintegrate beam at enemies, and the damage is increased by 18%. On the pants, we are using these ones that are quite new, so this is Hastened Oblivion. So with this, Disintegrate's cooldown is reduced by 1.6 seconds when damaging enemies up to a maximum of 4.8 seconds. Disintegrate damage is increased by 10% from that being an awakened slot. Moving on to the main hand, we've got Rift Carver. I don't know if I even need to tell you about this one anymore, but obviously it fires tracking missiles at random nearby enemies, and Arcane Torrent damage is increased 18% and 10% from the Awakened slot there. Moving on to offhand, we've got Hailstone. This is another favourite of mine, again really defensive. Ice Armor now protects you with 6 charges of damage immunity that also chills nearby enemies when they attack you. Ice Armor cooldown is reduced by 7.2%, and Ice Armor cooldown is decreased by 10% because it's an awakened slot. Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I do love my full attack builds. However, in Trial of the Hordes, you do definitely need this more defensive stance, and that's why we've gone in with Hailstone and the other essences stacked. On the alternate main hand, we're using Entropic Edge, so Disintegrate damage is increased 19%, nice and simple. And on the alternate offhand, we're using Blaster Cast. Magic Missile fires 2 additional missiles, each dealing 4,275 damage, and the damage there is increased by 90%. So overall, pretty much a defensive build, but with some nice attacks and nice boosts on different skills there. The main difference in my legendary gems is Echoing Shade. So this is what I swapped out Bottled Hope for, just for Trial of the Hordes, and I find this works really nicely. So no matter what quality you've got of Echoing Shade, if you've got it, definitely use it for Trial of the Hordes, because what the mobs will do is they will attack your summons rather than attacking you, and also it will give you that little bit increased damage, because when you're hitting a mob one side of the map, you'll quite often find that your summons are the other side of the map, hitting mobs and attacking mobs there instead. So definitely recommend going in with that if you have it. Now lastly, looking at Warband and the boost I'm using from here. So I'm using the attacker stance, so damage done is increased by 3.5%, critical hit chance is increased by 1%. Increase your damage dealt by 1% for 2 seconds every time you deal damage. This effect stacks up to 10 times and is removed when you take damage. So if you've got Ice Armor up, that basically increases your damage by 10%. Increases critical hit chance by 3% while above 70% of your total life, and increases critical hit damage by 10% while your critical hit chance is greater than 70%. So if you've got a good critical hit chance from your legendary gems, your secondary attributes and all of that, this is definitely worth using this stance. Obviously these remnants are specific to my warband, they might be slightly different in yours. But that is it from me today. I hope you found this video helpful. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.